And welcome to another episode of Business and Bubble Tea. Here on the podcast today, we have with us Sasha and Kelly, both the Chief Growth Officer of Ally Health and the co-founder of Ally Health. Welcome to the podcast, Sasha and Kelly.
Thanks for having us, Will. Really glad to be on the show.
Welcome to Business and Bubble Tea. Kelly, I would start with you, and I would like to ask you, as the co-founder of Ally Health, how did you came up with the idea, and what is the problem that you identify with the creation of Ally Health?
Yeah, sure. So to tell you a little bit about what we're doing at Ally Health, we're basically creating an on-demand mobile clinical care solution, which allows patients to basically conveniently fulfill their healthcare needs in their homes or wherever they want in their communities. And in short, basically imagine Uber for nurses. And behind this, we're actually solving for quite a lot of complexity and kind of managing a platform business that needs to balance out supply and demand, as well as kind of reflect the live location-based availability of healthcare practitioner. And the problem that we identified is rooted in personal experience of accessing digital GP online. And very quickly, having the convenience of seeing a GP in 15 minutes, but being told that I needed a blood test. And so for that blood test, I needed to go and see what's called a phlebotomist to have the sample taken. However, I soon discovered that that meant going back to my NHS GP, waiting 2 weeks for an appointment, and losing the convenience that I had first up with my digital GP encounter. So we started to look into what that market looked like of mobile nursing, and found that it was basically stuck in the 20th century. So that's it in short.
And just wondering, I guess there's some, you mentioned, I guess, taking blood and this sort of thing. There are some things that have to be done in a hospital, I guess. So what's been a challenge for you guys in terms of growth and reaching audiences? And like, what's the kind of market size that you've identified?
Yeah, I guess, the struggle that we've seen is in our service is really kind of around getting a cohort of nurses fast enough that can help us meet the needs of some of the partners that we're looking to bring on board in 2023. So kind of scaling up that side of the business is critical, but also we want to do it delicately because, as you say, people are needed in clinics. People kind of want to support the NHS. We want to support the NHS and everything we do. But getting those people on board has been a big struggle. Not a big struggle, but managing it delicately has been a bit of a struggle.
Yeah.
And kind of routing the nurses to the home is an interesting nut to crack. We've got systems that allow us to kind of automate that, to help us with route optimization. But definitely that's been an interesting challenge that we've taken on. When you ask about kind of what needs to be done in a clinic for bloods, really what our nurses can do in the home, the bloods they can draw in the home is pretty comprehensive. We can pretty much do everything that can be done in a clinical setting in the home. So that isn't as much of a challenge for us.
So do you address a specific group of, let's say clients, but patients, or is like a service open to everyone? How does it work?
Yeah, so I can kind of tackle this one, Kelly, if and fill in for me if I miss it. But on our side, really kind of helping those customers with mobility issues. So people who are maybe struggling to get into a clinic to get their bloods drawn. So those people who would be using community-based care anyway. But also people who are utilizing digital pathways, digital care pathways. Those individuals have chosen digital care pathways because it's convenient and because they don't want to go into clinics. So for us, being able to provide that at-home solution where the individual can choose not to leave the home, that is the type of person that we're serving.
And Sasha, turning more towards, I guess, your kind of growth strategy, how did you get going, I guess, in the sort of, I guess, earlier days? What's been your key to your success with growth?
So I joined the business actually after Kelly founded the company. So Kelly did get started on kind of securing some, kind of foundational partnerships, getting the labs onboarded, really getting everything set up. So I was blessed on that front that Kelly did lay an incredibly strong foundation for the company. But in terms of when I came on, what we really did was look at kind of what are the different kind of groups of companies, what are kind of the different types of labs, and kind of clinics that would really benefit from our service and have a cohort of patients who would be able to utilize this and, would benefit from using this. So when we did that exercise, we identified, clinical trials, decentralized clinical trials. We identified private clinics, we identified labs, we identified insurance companies, digital health platforms. And then really, how did we kind of go out and start knocking on doors? We really kind of leaned on our network. In the early days, people were fantastic, made wonderful introductions, but then really actually hit the ground running ourselves and sent cold emails out, and took meetings with people that we didn't know. So I'd say there's a mixture of utilizing the network and also just putting ourselves out there and showing people what we're up to.
Would you say the focus is B2B2C, or would you say it's more a kind of B2B approach? Because you mentioned offering a slightly, I guess, an addition on top of I wouldn't say the NHS, let's say, but you're offering that niche between the NHS and, shall we say, Harley Street, that provides real optimized level of care. What would you say is your key customer at the moment?
Absolutely. We've started with B2B2C as an angle. And for us, that's really where we've made that decision, because it allowed us to gain scale also faster, in the sense that, we feel it will take, and it does take, a little bit of legwork to secure these partnerships in the early days, because it is, at the end of the day, enterprise sales model. However, we're able to cater to smaller healthcare providers, which have faster kind of sales cycles, if you want, as well as the larger insurance groups. So mixing both of these type of enterprise clients and smaller SME clients has been a really key to the fast uptake of an interest and growing interest we've seen in the service. I think there is potential for us in the longer term to also open it up to more of a B2C type of service, if you see it that way. However, for us, it's very important to really make sure we're first tackling the B2B route, so that our service is really nicely embedded in pathways. Otherwise, it's very hard to make sure that it falls in the right place in the patient pathways. So that's something we're really acutely conscious of.
And what makes the UK such a good market for something like for a company like Ally Health?
Lots of different dynamics at play, I would say, but I can start picking up a few, and then Sasha will probably.
What screamed to you? The UK is where I want to be, because we hear about biotechs. They tend to, the early stage. They come out of Oxford. We have the AstraZeneca vaccine, that sort of thing, and then they all go to the US and they list on the NASDAQ. And so the US is seen as that kind of, Boston in particular, seen as the sort of biotech haven. So what about the UK has made healthcare so big? And I know there's companies like Humor, for example, that started out in the UK with the kind of, I guess, clinical solutions for, digitizing records and everything like that. So what for you makes the UK, screams to you that it's the market?
Yeah. I'll take one angle. I think, Sasha, you'll come at it from a different one probably, but for me, what's interesting in the UK and what's made it really a good breeding ground for innovation in healthcare is the NHS, and I think there is both good and bad with the NHS. The bad is the fact that we're facing a huge backlog of 7 million patients on the NHS not able to access care, and so there is at this moment in time, I think, an awareness from the leadership there that they need to get external help to solve that backlog. That innovations and digital health solutions will be the way to solve for that crisis. So there is that appetite for innovation that comes from just the urgency of the situation. And there is also a setup from the NHS that, they've tried lately to open accelerators. So there's the NHS accelerator, there's innovation happening at different levels of it. So I think that has led to companies like Huma, you mentioned, AccuRx is another great example, being adopted at pace and seeing the usage and the penetration that, only startups in the rest of Europe could dream of. So that's probably my NHS kind of contribution. But Sasha, you maybe have another view on it.
Fantastic. And Sasha?
Yeah, no, I think, Kelly, it's so true. And there is such opportunity to grow and develop and innovate in that offering. So yeah, I mean, I'll echo your point for sure. That's the big kind of goal, the big hairy goal. But really, I mean, having experience working in the States in the healthcare space, and coming to the UK, I really saw that, the health tech space in the UK and the awareness around health and well-being, is slightly behind the US. And usually that's the case, for innovation and, adopting new products. But when I was living in the States, people knew, all about their health and well-being. They do bloods regularly. They're really engaged in, preventive health and making sure they're not getting sick. Whereas in the UK, there's a tendency towards using healthcare and healthcare solutions kind of for sick care, once you've gotten sick. So to me, that dynamic is really exciting and interesting because there's space to grow and there's space to make change. So I really see the UK as being in a great position to kind of still innovate, which is great for us.
So considering this space to innovate and looking at the future, what do you see for Ally Health in the future, and which future trend do you see also in healthcare?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think I'll start by answering the last bit first and then kind of position us in that, if that's okay. I do think that the future of healthcare and digital health is rooted in more accessibility. And I think that will inevitably be rooted in a greater adoption of digital health solution. So for me, like the main driver behind this is basically a capacity issue, as I mentioned before, with our overwhelmed clinical settings. And so there's that opportunity to be rooted in really community care. But that's really, I think, where we come in, and we're really keen to help expand how much is accessible to patients from within their communities, within their homes, and work really hand in hand with these digital health solutions where we can help create that hybrid pathway which starts, virtually on your mobile phone, for example, or starts with your monitoring, like Huma does, monitoring your vitals at home, etc. So we start there, and then there's inevitably a point in your patient pathway where you're going to need a wound dressing, or you're going to need phlebotomy to be done, and that's where we step in to create that bridge, but we keep you in the comfort of your home. So for me, that's the future is definitely in healthcare outside of clinical settings.
And I guess one for you, Sasha, what's been a big hurdle for growth in the way of like what challenges have you encountered trying to grow? You have, because in the UK the big question is the NHS is obviously represents a big opportunity, but it's also an incumbent player. So what's been a big challenge?
Yeah, great question. So I guess, in a very cheesy way, I'll start by saying every single group we chat with has said this is needed. It's really, really something that will, ensure better patient outcomes and, keep clinics kind of focused on people that really need to be there and need to have that kind of hands-on in-clinic treatment, which is the case for some people. They can't be treated in the home. But I would say the biggest challenge so far has been that kind of bigger question of, well, when you get there, how will you integrate with the NHS? How will you ensure there's a kind of smooth patient pathway? How do you get kind of the cohort of staff and medical professionals onto your platform? And really, I think that's not a challenge that Kelly and I are afraid to tackle. So yes, it's a question that we get, but we're going to tackle it, and we're excited to tackle it. So that would be probably the trickiest thing right now, and I don't have an answer for you on it, but we'll get there.
It's okay.
Thank you. Thinking about challenges, Kelly, can I ask you what has been the biggest challenge you encountered while founding Ally Health?
The biggest. There's been a few, but it wouldn't be a startup if it wasn't the case. So I think ultimately, ultimately it's finding that sort of elusive product market fit. And we're standing here today talking to you confidently about our mobile on-demand clinical care solution. If you had spoken to us 6 months ago, we would have probably told you about a slightly different solution. And that's normal, right? So I think it's just, for me, the biggest challenge has been to really keep agile and open-minded as to what the right solution to the problem you're seeing is. Because, the problem that I laid out earlier in the podcast is the same. It's how do we bridge the gap to the in-person care? I had a very different solution initially, and I thought this was all going to be rooted in diagnostics. We did research, we got feedback from across the market, and very quickly realized that actually there was something that we could do a bit differently and better that sat kind of aside from that initial hypothesis. So it's letting go of your conviction has been a big challenge, and being agile and willing to pivot, but also bringing the team alongside with me on that journey. And I think since Sasha's joined, it's been also amazing to have her support to do that and to feedback from all these discussions that she's having, so that it gives the confidence to the team that is a decision rooted in market needs and market feedback. And that's been great.
And I guess we just have time for one final question, but I'll ask it to both of you. So 2 questions almost. What advice would you give, first Kelly, what advice would you give to, I guess, any would-be entrepreneurs looking to go into the healthcare space or medtech? And then to you, Sasha, what would be your advice to anyone looking to go into it, but from a BD perspective?
I think what I would say to an aspiring health tech entrepreneur is to do your research. First, brace, because it's going to be a long journey. So make sure you have lots of resilience and grit, and that you have the confidence that you are able to overcome setbacks. But I think do your research before anything, and if you come as an entrepreneur with more of a technical background, know that perhaps you should go and find someone that complements your skills with more of that understanding of the healthcare market. And I think it's quite hard to come at it from a purely sort of sector agnostic perspective. It's going to take you much longer to navigate. So do your research and find people that can help you along the way to really navigate the space and narrow down on the problem.
And Sasha?
Yeah, I mean, Kelly, you kind of took the words right out of my mouth in terms of, it's a long ride, and kind of get ready for that and be ready to work pretty hard. But from a BD and sales perspective, I think, be unafraid to really kind of knock on doors, and have conversations that you maybe feel are a little bit early. And the healthcare community in the UK and in the US is filled with people that are kind of keen to make change and keen to help others. And I think are open-minded to new solutions and hearing about new solutions. So I would tell someone to be unafraid to get involved and go out and chat with the biggest people, the biggest groups out there, and tell them what you're doing, because, you could help people and really make a difference in people's lives. So that's what kind of Kelly and I are hoping to do. So it's not, in my mind, kind of traditional sales. It's kind of sales with a bigger purpose. So stick at it for anyone who's doing it.
So going out there with purpose, I guess.
Yeah, with purpose and just kind of being relentless, I think is the key.
Well, that's all we've got time for today, but thank you so much for joining us on Business and Bubble Tea, Sasha and Kelly.
Thanks so much for having us, Will and Roberta.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both.